Welcome to the Knox County Board of Education, September 29th
Yes,
session.
but you can hear me now, right?
Yes, we can hear you. Are we ready? Please stand for a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Ms. Owen. So tonight is a work session primarily for discussion regarding our voting items, which will be considered at the regular session meeting next Wednesday, October 6th. That meeting will be held here in the main assembly room at 5 p.m. Do we have any elected officials here tonight? Are there any changes to the agenda? Okay, our law director is out there, Mr. Boot, I think. Okay. So are there any changes to the agenda? So do we have a motion to approve the agenda? Okay, so a motion by Mr. Watson, a second by Ms. Babb. All in favor? Aye. So Ms. Babb will be doing our vision and mission spotlight tonight.
Sure. I wanted to talk about something that I think is real important to us, which is about the education of our students and obviously their goals for after school, after they finish with Knox County. And I had the chance to talk to Chrissy Delejandra, head of Tennessee Achieves today, and I'm going to kind of give you a report on what she gave me, just which I think is exciting news about what we're accomplishing here. Basically, in 2020, the state of Tennessee experienced a sharp decline in the percentage of students enrolling in college. This included four-year institutions, community colleges, and technical colleges. While the state experienced a 6% point decline in its college-going rate, Knox County saw a 2% point increase in 2020. This is due no doubt to all the hard work of our teachers, counselors, and leaders who continue to encourage college pathways. We also believe the implementation of Knox Promise, which was a $6.6 million investment from the Haslam Family Foundation, contributed to this growth. Knox Promise, which I think some of us went to the announcement that they did a couple of years ago about this, provides every Knox County graduate who enrolls at community and technical colleges by way of Tennessee Promise a proactive completion coach. Students who come from families earning less than $70,000 annually also have access to completion grant emergency aid funding. Knox Promise completion grants address food and housing insecurities as well as supports like books, transportation, and computer costs. The marriage of the completion coach with additional funding has been a game changer for our most vulnerable students. So anyway, I thought this was just kind of exciting news to see that while the state had seen a decline in post-high school enrollment, that we as Knox County had seen a jump. And one other thing I'd like to highlight, I think several of us got invited, or we all got invited to the open house for the Kelly Academy, and several of us got to go tour that, and it was just very exciting to see the opportunities for some of our students that are having trouble completing high school in the normal high school setting. And I had actually learned about the school years ago when it was actually out at the mall, and it was kind of a very different setup where it was very computer-based. But at the open house, I really appreciated all the teachers that stayed that evening and met with us to kind of talk about how they really work on individual plans to get so many of these kids graduating, because that's really is our goal, to get all of these Knox County kids graduated. So I think there are just some exciting things going on, and I just wanted to highlight those.
All right, and so Superintendent Thomas, you have a report?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'd like to start by saying thank you to our families, students, and staff for their support as we work to implement the federal order reinstating face coverings inside our school facilities. I am very appreciative of everyone's effort and the graciousness provided to our school staff. However, I'd like to acknowledge that this federal order has presented some ongoing challenges at our school, and just to talk about a few of those with you. And those include students who are not in class receiving regular classroom instruction, staff who are being pulled from their duties to supervise these students, and bus driver vacancies that we had before the face mask order have been complicated by drivers who do not or refuse to wear face masks. And we have students with medical issues through their IEPs or 504 plans but are not yet exempt from the federal order. And we have certified and classified employees who have either resigned or are at home for refusal to wear a face mask. We're continuing to manage and monitor these situations as we work to comply with the federal order. Also, I'd like to remind families that fall break is coming up soon, beginning on October 11. And tonight, we're adding a new element to the superintendent's report at the suggestion of Vice Chair Ebony Satterfield. And that would be a data moment. And this is an opportunity to highlight our district's priorities and initiatives by focusing on a particular number or set of numbers. Tonight, I want to highlight a very important segment of data, which is the proficiency level we saw on last year's TCAP test. As you know, our district worked very hard to offset the impact of COVID-19 during the 2021 school year, but like many districts across the state, we did see student proficiency drop significantly in most subjects. And as superintendent, I want us to be laser focused on bouncing back from the learning loss and helping our students regain any academic ground that they may have lost. And to do that, I think we need to have a very clear view of the challenges we're facing. As I conclude my remarks, I would like to invite Steve Rudder, who's already up at the podium there, and ask him to provide some more details about our TCAP results. And again, the data moment tonight is just a brief summary of the data, and just would like to invite the board, if you want more detailed information about these data reports, that maybe that's something we put on the workshop where we can devote a little bit more time to it. So at this time, Madam Chair, members of the board, I'll turn it over to Steve. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas, members of the board. I appreciate the invitation to come speak with you tonight. And what we decided to talk about since this is a data moment, actually, I practiced this before I came, and it took me 25 minutes, but I promise I narrowed it down. What we decided to talk about was student achievement, or sometimes you'll hear it called student proficiency. They're kind of interchangeable terms out there. And so what I'm talking about tonight is a real high-level view of that, and it's the combined proficiency. And when I say that, what I mean is we're talking about all subjects, math, English, science, social studies, and all grade levels aggregated together. So most of these three slides that I have are the charts on them are stacked bar charts. So if you're rusty on your charts and aren't used to looking at these, each segment represents a performance category on the TCAP exam. The state classifies each student's performance in one of four categories, the highest being mastered, the next one is on track, and both of those categorizations are considered proficient in grade level or subject standards on the TCAP test that they attempted. And then the other two that aren't considered proficient are approaching and below. So for the stacked bar chart, each of these colored segments represents a portion of our test results for each of the last four testing cycles. And the width of the segments are to scale. So wider segments mean a larger portion of our students fall into that group. Narrower segments mean that fewer number of our students fall into that category. So what we're really interested in here tonight is mostly the blue and green categories. Those are the blue is mastered, green is on track, yellow is for approaching, and the red is for our students that scored in the below category. So when I look at this initial chart, these are all the test results aggregated together, like I said, for each of the last four testing cycles. So the first thing that, when I look at this chart that sticks out to me is there's a year missing, right? So that was because state testing was suspended in 2020, so there are no results for that year. The other thing that kind of strikes me when I look at this data is that, from 2017 to 2019, the width of the green and blue segments don't vary very much at all across the years. So in fact, when I went back and looked at more testing history, sort of that average amount of change that we typically see from year to year is about 1% either way, right? So as a district, like it moves, but it's at a glacial pace kind of a lot of times, right? So and I say that, I bring that up because if you look at the last bar, our test results from 2021 and compared to 2019, and you add up the blue and green segments, what you'll see is our proficiency overall dropped 3.9% compared to the last testing cycle. So 3.9% when you say it out loud doesn't really sound like a lot, but when you consider the context, it's quite a large shift, right? So my main takeaway from this graph, this chart, is that there were just a lot of challenges that happened over the last couple of years due to the COVID-19 pandemic that were out of schools' controls, teachers' control, the superintendent's control, everybody, that likely had very negative impacts on student achievement, right? So the next slide is the same sort of information divided up into our, well, not all of them, but 4 of our ethnic and racial groups. These 4 ethnic and racial groups comprise about 99% of our student population. We do have very small percentages of Native American and Pacific Islander students, but they aren't represented here. So when I look at these groups of students, the first thing that stands out is when I look at the Asian group is that they have, you look at the mastered and on-track segments of their stacked bar charts, like their level of achievement is much higher than any of these other groups, right? So from 2017 to 2019, the average achievement for that group was 71%. But even so, like if you look at the last chart, you'll see that the width of the green and blue bars, the on-track and mastered, shrunk, and it shrunk 7%. So this group of students that's the largest single drop of any group of students that we track, was this Asian group of students. So if you look at the next group over, our African American students, in 2018, 2019, their proficiency was 18%, and they saw a 3% drop last year compared to the year prior. A similar kind of story with our Hispanic students, and this one is kind of a shame to me because if you look at the on-track and mastered segments for our Hispanic students, they were kind of marching up, like from 2017 to 2018 to 2019, and then the pandemic happened and they lost all that progress. I mean, we're talking about a different group of students, but it's back to 23%, the same thing it was in 2017. So, and then our white students, the last couple of years, the proficiency rate on all subjects was 46%, and they saw a decline of 3% in that group. So again, the thing that I take away from this slide is nobody was safe from the pandemic, right? So we saw declines in each one of these categories. The other thing that's really noticeable on this chart is there's a really wide variation in student performance across these groups, right? Like you compare the Asian students' proficiency rates to the white students, to the African American, to the Hispanic. There's big academic achievement gaps in there, right? So, and on the last slide, there are 3 groups of students on this one. I labeled it accountability groups, but because these are the groups we track through our accountability system. And these groups of students are probably our most academically fragile students that we have. And you can kind of see that with the proficiency rates. So for our economically disadvantaged students, the last couple of years, in 17, 18, 18, 19, they had a proficiency rate of about 19%. And they experienced a 3% decline in proficiency. English language learners is similar. Like they were 19% proficient in 18-19. They actually dipped just 1% in 2021. And then our students with disabilities is the group that kind of bucked the trend, right? They had 10% proficient in 2019, and then it actually went up 1% in 2021. So again, so 2 out of these three groups of students, we saw declines in proficiency. So again, it's one of those things that I just think that all the challenges with the pandemic just had negative impacts on our overall student proficiency.
One thing I was kind of noticing in all of them, I mean, there's obviously drops, but like the green actually seems pretty consistent. It's actually on the blue side. So it's almost like our kids, it's not that they're just even slipping to, you're slipping out of that top, but I mean, the green bar almost seems pretty consistent on
Yeah.
most of the things. It's are actually at the top where we seem to have not,
Well, I think it's everybody's.
yeah.
Everybody slid down a little
Right.
bit, right? And so the kids that were in the green, some of the ones on the edge of the green
Yeah.
dipped into the yellow, and I
Blue
think,
into the green.
yeah, I think that's what happened. So the other point I was going to make about that last slide, if we can get it back up there, was that it's kind of hard to academic achievement gaps for those last three groups are kind of hard to see in that last slide because the comparison groups aren't there. So like for example, the economically disadvantaged students, last year their proficiency rate was 16%. If you compare that to the non-economically disadvantaged students, whose proficiency rate was 43%, I mean, they're three times, their proficiency rate's three times what the economically disadvantaged students are. So there's some pretty big achievement gaps that we monitor and we try to take action to help. So, and that's it for me. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Awesome. Thank you so much, and thank you, Superintendent Thomas, for doing that. My goal, board, for doing that is just to have us have discussion about our students, our student outcome and student growth. If we want to dive deeper into it, then we can have work sessions. But I would like to see at all of our board meetings to talk about student progress. So that was the first implementation. But the goal is to, if we need to dive deeper into it, then let's have a work session about it versus here in the meeting. So thank you, Superintendent Thomas.
I appreciate that because I think if we actually keep seeing the numbers, it keeps our focus on it, and it keeps, I know our staff sees these numbers a lot. I think sometimes we don't see it as much. I appreciate it.
And I would agree, and thank you, Mr. Rudder and Mrs. Superintendent Thomas and Ms. Satterfield for that fabulous suggestion. So before we begin our discussion, the backup detail on item 10A regarding employee health insurance premiums has been updated. Everyone saw that. And also, since we invited Tammy Grissom from the Tennessee School Board Association and Matt Myers from Knox County Procurement to join us tonight for discussion and questions about the upcoming superintendent search, I would like to move the discussions on that item to the front, if everybody's okay with that. Oh, but first, sorry. We have a concept briefing for Western Heights redevelopment plan, and I think Mr. Oak, no, he's not here yet. Ms. Renee, sorry.
I'm not Mr. Oakes, but I have the pleasure this evening of introducing Mr. Ben Bentley. He's the Executive Director and CEO of KCDC, and Dr. Marissa Mozen. How'd I do? She is over strategic partnerships, and she is the policy director at KCDC. They are here with us this evening to discuss the proposed Western Heights redevelopment. And so I will gladly turn this microphone over to the two of you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kelly. Thank you, Board, and thank you, Superintendent, for allowing us to speak with you. I promise we'll be very concise. I just want to introduce KCDC a little bit. I'm sure y'all are familiar with the work we've done, but we house about 20,000 individuals in Knox County at any given time. About half of those are through what would be considered traditional public housing, so physical housing sites like Western Heights that we're here to talk about tonight. Another half of those through our Housing Choice Voucher Program, which are privately owned units spread across the community. Part of what we do beyond just housing families is we look at neighborhoods and say, how can we utilize the reinvestment in housing, but also other factors that create family and child success. For instance, investments in education, investments in workforce development. How do we look at all those things to create a plan for a community that's really going to create a thriving neighborhood and thriving families for years to come? So right now we've been working with the community over the last 9 months to look at Western Heights. Are y'all generally familiar with Western Heights and Beaumont? All right, we're going to show a map in a minute, so if you're not, it'll be okay. And I'm going to turn it over to Marissa Mawazin to talk to y'all a little bit about the planning process to this point, where we're at, and then I'm sure y'all are interested in how this plan is going to impact and coordinate with education. So we're going to make some specific points around that, and if y'all have any questions, we'll be happy to take those. Thanks, y'all. Marissa?
Thank you. So y'all should have a briefing book in front of you, so I'm just going to walk through that book. What we're doing is we're actually combining with the city and filing a joint application for what's called the Choice Neighborhoods Implementation Grant. That implementation grant is a $30 million award that HUD will make to cities around the U.S. They'll make 5 to 6 awards a year. That grant really is focused on not just housing, on improving housing in an area, but people in neighborhoods. So it's combining all 3 of those objectives together to lift an entire section of a neighborhood or a city at the same time. And so that's what we're applying for. And the NOFO hasn't come out yet. It should come out in the next few weeks. So we've been working on this for about a year to look at what could be done in the Western Heights Beaumont area to help the residents that live in that neighborhood, not just in KCDC housing, but the neighborhood overall. We spent the past few months, as I said, going through that process. It's a 4-phase process that you see in front of you. The first step is to build a Head Start. That is a neighborhood that needs early childhood education. About 43% of the residents on our property alone, on the KCDC Western Heights property, are children. That's a big chunk, with having about 800 residents there, with 43% being kids. So we're building a Head Start, 132-seat Head Start in partnership with CAC. And we actually broke ground on that just a few weeks ago. Miss Kelly came and helped us dig some dirt, so we're excited about that. The next phase will be a renovation of the 1930s housing that's on the site. That'll be a substantial exterior renovation. We've recently renovated the inside. The next step will be a lot of vacant land that'll be converted to both non-housing and housing purposes that I'll highlight in a second. And then the 4th phase, we're actually going to tear down all the 1950s housing that's there now. Unfortunately, they didn't build as well in the 1950s as they did in the 1930s. So that housing just unfortunately has not stood the test of time and needs to be redone so the residents have a quality place to live. As you can see, the neighborhood boundary there, so when we talk about choice neighborhoods, our neighborhood boundary for investment is that entire green map. So everything from Tennessee to Beaumont to 275 to Western. Our KCDC-owned land is that pink area. The dark pink is our target area, the light that will be newly constructed, and the light pink is the renovation. Beaumont Elementary does fit into this map. It is located on the map in the bottom, right actually where it says Avenue. That gray-topped building is Beaumont. Beaumont is the school that serves this neighborhood in terms of elementary school primarily. All of that neighborhood also fits in Census Tract 14, so there's a lot of data available on that census tract. So we've been doing the process for about a year. Choice Neighborhoods is very dependent on neighborhood input and resident input. So all of the ideas that we've come up to date are actually based on the residents. You'll see there's a picture. We've been doing online Zoom meetings with residents due to COVID. So thanks to some funding from the city, we handed out 200 tablets to residents so they could participate in Zoom meetings. We do 2 a month since February to get community input on what this plan needed to be. And we've also held neighborhood meetings as well, in-person meetings with mailers going out to all of those households. Through that, we did a needs assessment as well with the residents in addition to the online and in-person meetings. And all of that came to this resident summary slide that really shows what residents are looking for. And residents in this neighborhood are no different than any others. They want a safe neighborhood. They want quality schools for their kids. They want transportation options, activities, programming, all of that great stuff. So that's really what our plan is driven around. In addition to that, we have 15 stakeholder groups that have about 100 nonprofits and other organizations across the area. And we have an education stakeholder group, an early childhood education stakeholder group, and an adult education stakeholder group. We invited all the principals from the schools to attend and really share their input of what this community could benefit from, and then help us to interpret the data that came from residents of how we could address resident needs. So all of that really boils down into this plan of these goals that you see in front of you. Really on the people plan, the education one is the reason why we're here tonight, is to share that education goal. That is part of one of HUD's requirements, is for us to partner extensively with the county school system or the city school system in the place that you're at, and look at improving education outcomes at the target schools where these children attend. And so that's what we've been working together with the principals, with the school leadership, and now we're here today just to share this preliminary plan. For youth development in this area, we're going to extend our Boys and Girls Club that's located there, add an addition onto that, hopefully through philanthropic dollars that we raise, to provide additional supports for youth and teens in the area to give them a place to congregate. Currently, that facility can serve 40. They want to serve 120. And we're also going to have a neighborhood anchor zone, so we're going to have a new commercial center in that area that's being built on the vacant land. That's going to incorporate job training, arts and innovation spaces, workforce development, a senior space, healthcare spaces, and really the arts and maker space that the community asked for, playing off of Beaumont Elementary and their arts magnet. That is going to be the focal point of the community, that the community really asked for more arts and innovation opportunities and entrepreneurship opportunities at the micro level, at the individual household level. And so that's what this whole plan. And I know you have a long agenda tonight, so this is a very brief briefing. If you need more in-depth, we are happy to meet with you one-on-one to talk about the plan in depth. And there's a picture there of what the park, what the location looks like today. Then you have the artist's rendition of what that area will look like. We have an agreement, we've talked with the city, who's agreed to look at putting Knoxville's first regional destination park on this site. That park could include very large playgrounds and playscapes, hillside climbing structure, very akin to what a grown-up chutes and ladders game would look like, because this is a very hilly site, as well as the neighborhood asked for a playground and a splash pad. And so we're looking at all those options for them. The other thing they wanted was a safe walking path to Beaumont Elementary. So if you have not ever walked to Beaumont Elementary before, the kids actually, there's no sidewalks on some of these streets. So they're walking down an alley, and they walk down the alley to go to school the wrong way. The school system did like the alley and found funding to be able to do that because it does get dark in some of the mornings. So trying to make it as safe as possible. But the school system can't build roads and sidewalks and really improve all of the infrastructure. So what we're proposing is to actually take some of our land and put a safe walking path to Beaumont through there. So that's one of the options we're looking at and that we're proposing. And that's kind of seen on that neighborhood plan there with Beaumont being in the purple with the green in the background. So from the school system, when this grant comes due, what we're doing is we're still having our ongoing planning meetings of what makes sense for the schools. We're currently capturing all the programming and activities that currently go on in the schools, especially those that are targeted at helping improve test scores and scores of kids, because HUD's going to look for that. When we are selected for a site visit and we become a finalist for the grant, they will come and the school system will actually give the school presentation. It won't be us. And they will look for the school system being heavily invested in improving the scores of these communities. I've mentioned Beaumont a few times. The other schools that our target residents attend are Northwest Middle and Fulton. But in that boundary map, children that live in that boundary that I showed you also attend Lonsdale Elementary, Westview Elementary, Maynard Elementary, Bearden Middle, and West High. So just in that 1 mile, 2 mile zone, you have that many schools represented. So we're looking at all the investment there. And we're also going to work with the school district to see if there's interest in new programming in some of those schools to increase test scores. That's going to look really good to HUD. I mentioned the $30 million grant that we're going after. We're actually going to pair that with about $110 million of local investment. So in terms of project scope, it's a big project in this community. So we're hoping the school system will be able to be a good partner and really step forward and help us with that. And the other thing we wanted to present, because we know it's important to you, is the projected increase in children in that area. I mentioned 43% have of our particular site is children, which is about 300, it's exactly 338 children right now on that site. We will, by the time we are done with full leasing, as well as adding the additional units that we need to add because of this grant, we are currently projecting about 737 children on that site. That's a low estimate, that's a conservative estimate, because we can't control what happens in the neighborhood. There are over 100, 200 vacant lots right now. Actually, there's 338 vacant lots. Not all of them are buildable. About half of those are buildable. If all of those come back with buildable homes that have children as well, this number will go up. But that is a concern that we have, that when we shared our plan, as well as the additional construction that'll happen for multifamilies on this site, of the capacity of the school. Do you all I know that was really brief, and we have in-depth plans. I could talk for an hour of all the great things that are going to happen on this site with all the partners. Are there any questions for us?
Ms. Babb?
Well, I have a question. I'm not sure who would answer. It's probably somebody with the school system. Do we know what capacity we have right now at Beaumont? And I know Russ is not here. Does Ms. Kelly have that?
Ms. Kelly has that information.
I have Mr. Oaks's prepared statement. So thank you for asking, Ms. Babb. Our preliminary analysis of the proposed Western Heights redevelopment indicates that the expected additional student yield will stress the current Beaumont Elementary School facility beyond its capacity, which you alluded to. As we examine this more closely, it is highly likely that we will find it necessary to propose a new school with greater capacity to be built in the fiscal year 2026-2027 timeframe. An addition to the current school may be possible, but the constrained nature of the current campus will drive the feasibility of this option. And might I add, anything beyond that statement, I will communicate directly to Mr. Oaks.
And let me answer, too, we'll get you that number or get the board that number in terms of current capacity.
Are we, I know Rural High School is sort of in that vicinity. I know it's not right in this thing. Is there any talks of looking at that property if we're going to need an elementary school? I just don't know.
I'll let KCDC, we mentioned that, but when we've had our meeting, but.
I love to speak when I know nothing on the subject, so here I go. Yeah, so the county had put out an RFP for the rural side. I think they're going through the process of evaluating those proposals from a private development standpoint. Obviously, that site was a school in the past, so it seems like something that could be considered in the future. If there was a little more fidelity around, like, I love the fact that there's a year attached to the statement that was made by Mr. Oaks. If there was fidelity and a bit of commitment, we could look at, I mean, there's a lot of land in that area, trying to identify a site for a future school, if that was something that the school board wanted. But, you know, buildable land is a commodity, and so just to constrain an area 6 or 7 acres without knowing something's going to happen there would be a tough ask, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, hearing this, I mean, I just hope we're, as a school system, are being proactive about this, just because, like, obviously, Rural has been a high school. I have driven past it. It does not look like a usable building itself, but obviously, there's a lot of land there. But as you said, there's other places. So I just hope that we're having continued conversations with the school system if we're seeing this as a concern coming up fairly quickly, it sounds like, with if everything goes through like y'all say, which I guess we're all very hopeful it does. It sounds like a great opportunity, but it kind of makes us look at the school system as I do think we need to be working hand in hand on this to make sure that we can accommodate the students that might be coming in.
Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a technical question. You mentioned 338 vacant lots. Is that all within this particular area?
That is within the neighborhood boundaries. So the slide that has the pink small section that is Western Heights, and then the broader green section is
Right.
the neighborhood.
So within
boundary.
that green section total? Yeah,
Yes,
that's
sir.
tremendous, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Horn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I see that the application is due in the fall. When would, and the reason for my question, I'm thinking about if the Beaumont building would be stressed, I'm thinking about time frame. When do you suggest, or when are you projecting these units would be added?
So we are working closely with Mr. Oaks on that. So our development team right now, these will come on in phases of roughly 100 to 150 units at a time per year. I mean, that's a very rough estimate. So it won't happen overnight. It's really good that we're having the conversation right now. But we can get, obviously, the graph that shows the increase in students, that's roughly right. Like you can see, we're sitting at 338 students in that area right now. Year 1 stays flat, but year 2, we'll have a project come online and you can see it ramp up from there.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does, yes, thank you.
What year 1, I mean, is that 2022? I mean, what is the year 1 expected to be?
Yeah, I think year 1 would be 2022 and year 2, 23 and so on. Yep. All right.
You mentioned timeline for the grant, so you will see the HUD requires a letter of commitment from the school that's voted on. So I know the school system's putting together a list of current projects that go on at these schools. So you will see that come through, hopefully on your agenda in November or December, once we get the timeline from HUD, when they actually issue the RFP. We'll be able to predict that a little better.
Thank you. Just last question. If any of us wanted to hear more detail and learn more about the project, what's the best way to go about doing that?
Just, yeah, reach out to me.
Okay.
I'm happy, or Chris. Chris can set it up as well. Yeah, we would love to meet one-on-one. Marissa's got like a 3-hour presentation. So
Thank you.
thanks, y'all.
Thank you. So I think Matt Myers is here from Knox County Procurement. So at our annual workshop last week, some people had some questions about the RFP process. Should we move forward with the superintendent search with an outside firm? So he is here to answer. Or could you just briefly maybe describe what that process is and the timeline for it?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the board, my name is Matt Myers. I'm the Procurement Director for Knox County Government. Really quickly, I'll just go through the RFP process, if that's the process that you all chose to go through. It's used when an award is not to be based solely on the lowest price. We develop significant evaluation factors, and these are just, things that I thought of today. The qualifications of a firm, experience of their personnel, their methodology and how they go about selecting candidates, the delivery schedule, references, price, things like that. And you can choose any or all others that may be more important to you all as we go through the process. Once you determine those, we obviously add a weighting factor to those. Price is not the determining factor in an RFP process. In that process, you're looking at proposal against proposal on a qualitative basis, not necessarily a cost basis. Evaluation committee members, user department personnel, individuals with project responsibility, personnel with technical familiarity with project requirements, procurement division representative. This also allows you to have discussions and presentations from those proposals that are acceptable. A lot of times what we'll do, and after 23 years, it's always held true, there's always a natural break, whether that's at number 2 or 3 or 5 or 7 or however many. There's a natural break, and a lot of times where that natural break falls, we may call those individual firms in or companies or whatever the case may be, and let them do a presentation. Let us ask questions of the evaluation committee to ask questions of those firms so we can clarify what they have put on paper and what we're understanding they're telling us they can do. Looking at a time frame, this is a 21 business day on the street. I would not suggest shortening this in any form or fashion. This is too important of a decision to try to shorten that and rush things up. We would set a deadline for questions and answers. At the closing time, only those who have submitted, we will read those names aloud. Evaluations will proceed as expeditiously as possible. The short list, as I mentioned, will be created and given an opportunity to come in and present. Once those are done, final evaluations are completed, turned in, awards made to the highest evaluated proposal. That's what's required by our procurement regulations. So do contract documents after that, negotiate those, and then obviously seek BOE and commission approval for that firm to move forward. Just ironic, we had RFP 3088 closed today. 3088 was executive search services for the county. We had 2 respondents. One was local, one was from Plano, Texas. We were specifically asking for healthcare experience. Everybody's heard that Dr. Buchanan is retiring, so we reached out, did an RFP to find a search firm to help us search for 2 positions. One's the Senior Director of Public Health. The other one is the Public Health Officer. We additionally requested assistance in a compensation analysis and with comparable sized counties, municipalities as Knoxville is. as always, in every RFP, bid, RFQ, whatever, we always reserve the right to not make an award, for whatever reason that is. And I will entertain any questions.
Ms. Beth?
Yeah, I have a couple. If we decided to go the RFP route, how do y'all put it out there to the world of people to respond?
Well, we do have a database, but when we were doing our search, we looked at LinkedIn, Google, we did everything we could. We found the 25 top search firms that were listed. And we actually contacted them and said, hey, we're going to have an RFP out. We'd love for you to get registered, get in the list. If you want to, propose, please do. We're open to looking at other firms. I'm not just looking at what's in my database. We don't do this often. It's not like electricians or plumbers or contractors. So my database may be a little small, so I'm open to contacting anybody, anywhere.
My other question is, when they're reviewed, and obviously that point system is done, is there anyone from the school system involved? That's what I wasn't clear on. Who is that's actually doing that ranking?
Sure. I just came up with, it says use your department personnel. These are out of the procurement regulation. Use your department personnel, individuals with project responsibility. We're not doing a project, we're doing a search, so it's, similar. And, personnel with technical familiarity and project requirements. So, you can have, I always like to keep them as small as possible so we do schedules and, have so many people in a room. But, we could, do 5, of your school personnel. I'll yield to the law department on, a Board of Education member or members being on there as you're evaluating a group of proposals. We're going to make recommendation of award, and then you're going to vote on that as well. I don't know if there's a conflict in that chain of events, Mr. Dupler, but, that's something we can look at in the very near future.
So I guess my question is, it's not a set, this person, this person, this person. That can be, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
That was what I wanted.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You said you just completed the 3088, is that correct? That it was just awarded, the health department one?
It closed today at 2 o'clock,
Closed, okay, in terms of being on the street?
21 days.
Okay,
21 business days. So
Yep.
that's a month and a day.
so with that being on the street that long, what could we, for all the other steps, what could we reasonably expect in terms of a range? I mean, if it's out on the street 21 days, from the time it first went out to the time that it might close, what, I know it's hard to say for certain, but is there a range of time that you would feel comfortable articulating?
I will tell you, Mr. Watson, it's at least a 60-day process,
Sure.
at least a 60-day.
Right, 60 business days or 60 calendar days?
Well, I'll say calendar days.
Okay.
We have our evaluation ready, our evaluation committees ready.
Right.
Would I have liked to have gotten more than 2 responses? Absolutely.
Sure.
Again, another very important hire for the county on this side, very important hire for you all on your side.
Right,
But, it's a minimum of 60 days, and then with schedules and things like that, and, everything used to be in person. We can do virtual meetings. I'm not to help move things along and keep things rolling.
right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else? Thank you, Mr. Myers.
One thing real quick, if I
Yeah.
may, please.
Yes.
Mr. Thomas, Superintendent, Bob, I just want to say thank you. I'm not in front of you all often enough. That's probably a good thing, I guess. If I'm up here, then we may have a problem or something like that. I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all you have done for the education of our students in Knox County government. How many years?
Starting 49.
Okay. I don't believe there's a person in this room, in that AJ building, or all of Knox County who has devoted their life to education like you have. And I appreciate that very much. I hope you and your lovely wife have a wonderful retirement, and thank you again.
Well, thank you so much, man. It's been just a pleasure working.
Thank you. Pleasure working with you.
Thank you. Pleasure working with you and purchasing department. Y'all do a terrific job. So thank you for all the service you've provided to us for over the years too, man. Thank you.
Okay, and I think Ms. Grissom is here from TSBA, is that correct? There she is. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. So can you just kind of give us, to start with, a brief overview of how TSBA
You
does?
hear 'em?
You can't hear?
Hello. Yes, absolutely. Do the board members have a copy of our search packet in front of them? Okay. Okay. I'm not sure what all y'all discussed, and I don't want to repeat a lot of things, but we have two plans that we offer. Our first plan does not involve any community or employee input meetings. It's $6,500 is our plan one, and that is where the board develops the criteria of what they're looking for in a superintendent. They give us the criteria. We develop the brochure. We send the brochure out. We collect all the applications and resumes through our office, through an online portal. We screen the applicants, and then we submit the finalists to the board to interview. We develop the interview questions for the board if they choose to use our sample interview questions. Our questions are directly related to the criteria that the board adopted. Once we submit the finalists to the board, it's up to the board to interview those finalists. And then afterwards, we can help with contract negotiations, salary analysis, whatever the board needs from that point on. Plan two is $11,500. This plan involves us going and conducting employee and community meetings, gathering input from students, teachers, faculty, staff, administrators, the mayor, the county commission, city officials, and we conduct these meetings and ask 3 questions at each of the meetings. They're all conducted the same. They're 1-hour meetings. We ask each group, what are the good things that are going on in Knox County that you'd like to see continued? 2, what are the problems or challenges a new superintendent will face? And then 3, what are the personal characteristics you'd like to see in a superintendent? We compile those comments. We don't take individual names. We just compile those comments from each of the group. And then from that, we develop the criteria, what we think we've heard. And I also interview the board members of what they would like. And then we bring to the board a set of proposed criteria for the new superintendent. The board either edits, revises with additions or deletions. And then we pick back up where Plan 2 started with. We develop the brochure, we send it out, we collect all the applications, we do all the correspondence with the applications. No one on the board will have to deal with that legwork. We basically work for the board and do the legwork for the board. We don't make the decision, we don't pick the candidate, we just screen them. Okay.
Do you have a question, Beth?
Sure.
Okay.
Does TSBA have dedicated staff to handle this kind of process?
Yes.
Board Member Henderson?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. How long does the community input take for you guys, that portion?
We schedule one day, and we schedule all the meetings in one day. And then it'll take our staff a few days to compile the results, and then we schedule a meeting back with the board to present that and the proposed criteria. Absolutely.
was your question, Christy? We didn't hear that.
She was asking if we decided to go with TSBA, is TSBA prepared to start immediately? And she said yes, they would be.
Do both options include national searches?
Yes, we're part of the National Association of Superintendent Searchers, which involves every state. So once we send it out, it goes to everyone across the country.
Oh, I didn't do a good job. Board Member Owen.
Thank you. If we wanted a longer community process or a more extensive community process, could we have more than one day?
I'm not sure on what you're asking. I mean, why do we need longer than a day? We have a sample community schedule. I'm not sure if you're wanting a lot more groups, or I don't understand the question. I mean, well, we always, and I forgot to mention this, do a community forum in the evenings for everyone that couldn't make the other meetings. So typically, we'll have a meeting that'll include the central office and principals together. We obviously have the teachers by themselves, and we suggest a luncheon that would include the mayor, the county commission, business and community leaders all in one group. So we have groups, and we can do as many groups as you want, but typically we can get every group that you want in a day.
Board Member Watson.
Thank you. So I just wanted to point the board's attention to an email that Tammy responded to earlier in the day. I had sent about 11 technical questions to her in advance, some numbers and things like that. And so those responses you all have in your email. And Tammy, I really appreciate you doing that and taking the energy. Around the community process, is it always in person? Do you have an opportunity? I mean, do you all ever do anything virtual? Is there a survey that's a part of it? Or is it just live, in-person gatherings?
Okay, I heard him. Yes, we do these meetings in person. There's also a survey that we ask folks to fill out that has characteristics of a superintendent, such as, do you want someone with a financial background or school law, various, I think there's about 23 characteristics. So we ask folks to fill that out, but we also, those 3 questions that I just mentioned, we have an online form. So for those folks that cannot make one of the meetings in person, they can answer the questions online and also complete that survey online. So we have every option for folks. If you can't make an in-person meeting, then you'll have that community forum that night you could attend, or you can do the online.
Okay, she was asking Tammy if an organization like KEF, Knoxville Education Foundation, who has helped us before with some community gathering sessions, if we could use them to maybe get additional input from the community. Is that correct? And then build it into whatever's done. I guess what I'm taking from this is we've all talked a lot about, because people weren't all at our workshop on the last week, that we all found that community input's very important to us. I think that's what you're asking.
And I agree. I think the community input is important, and I've been at the association for 32 years, so I've done a lot of them. I think that the process that we have, we can work with anyone you're talking about, but you need to be mindful. I'm not sure what all the questions you're wanting to ask from the community, but I think you need to keep it to, you know, those questions. I think you need to keep the meetings to an hour. We're not there. We're not at these meetings to debate. We're not there to talk about any employee or anything like that. It is strictly, we're here. The board wants your input on our new superintendent. And that's why we keep those questions to those three. And it's worked very effectively in with other districts. So, I mean, I'm happy to talk with the foundation if you're wanting them to do the community meetings. That's totally up to you all. We can assist you in whatever manner, but.
Board Member Bab?
Yes, so if we, you know, if next week is a voting meeting, if we decided to go with TSBA, how long do y'all see the process from like when we say, yes, we're hiring you, to having candidates to review? What's your typical timeframe?
That is totally up to you all. We used to, before you had the days of internet and email, we would say, you know, at least 6 to 8 months, but we can do it in less time. We can make it longer if you want to. I find that there's no reason to make it longer. Once we develop the vacancy brochure, with a click of a button, it's going to go out within a few seconds. And, you know, we can make the advertising period as long as you want. Most folks that are looking for superintendent jobs know to come to the State School Boards Association website. So we can make this search whatever time frame that you want to accomplish that. So whenever you want someone on board, that's up to you all. We work backwards. You tell us when you want the superintendent to assume the position, and then we develop a timeline working back from that date.
Board Member Henderson?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I just want to confirm, so the board can pick the community leaders for input, is that correct?
I didn't hear her. Yeah, that's up to you all. You all decide who you want to invite to the meetings. That's totally up to the board. We'll help you draft an invitation that would come from the board chairman saying, you know, we've set aside this meeting. But yes, absolutely, the list of who you invite is up to the board.
Board Member Watson?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. So, Tammy, one of my concerns has been if we put this on listservs, then what we're doing is we're asking people to come find it who are looking for jobs. Do you all, for lack of a better word, do you all do any type of headhunting where you say, we know that this person fits the bill, but they may not be clicking on our link? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes, we do recruit if we know of someone that we think would meet the criteria that the board adopts. We also, at each of the community meetings, and we also ask each of the board members, if you know of someone that you would like for us to reach out to apply for the position, we take those names and we send letters to those folks and say, you know, you've been recommended to apply. Please submit your information to us. So yes, we do recruit.
You all mentioned that there is you all will filter and then give us the top candidates. In that filtering process, are you all transparent with the reasons why the individuals did not move forward?
I would talk to individual board members about reasons we did not choose a particular candidate. For obvious reasons, I'm not going to state those in a public meeting.
Board Member Bounds?
Can Mr. Dupler address that? Because I remember in the last superintendent search, hiring practices, we are not allowed to tell applicants why they were not selected, or am I missing something here? I thought that that was kind of a part of the
Well, my
HR,
question.
or maybe that's a Scott Bolton question. I just remember dealing with our other HR person, and while board members might have known, there's a whole nother issue about informing candidates about their not knowing or not speaking to why they were not selected. And maybe I'm wrong, or maybe my memory doesn't serve me well.
And I want to clarify before, that question was, would you share with the board as to why candidates, not public, but to the board?
Well, I just meant to the candidates. So they could share with the board, but Tammy, they could share with the board, but not to the candidates legally. Whoever can answer that, Mr. Dupler, Mr. Bolton, Tammy.
Madam Chair, I'm happy to try it, and then I'll let Gary go first. Well, I'll go first. I think what you're talking about, when you get into that point, you open yourself up to some potential liability. It's just a practice to mitigate risk, in terms of someone filing a failure to hire claim. But I'll turn it over to Gary.
No, I think that's fair, Scott. I mean, what happens is, this board doesn't want to go into a huge amount of detail about why we didn't pick that person, why we didn't pick that person, what have you. Now, all these records are going to be public, as was discussed last week. So if somebody wants to go and look at those records, then they can look at them. But this board is best not declaring, okay, this is why we didn't pick this person or that person. You all just need to get a list of your top candidates at some point, and then just discuss, why you like this person or that person out of those candidates.
I understand that, and it could just be what it is, but I know that we're mitigating risk. It's more so the filter process if we were to go to Tsba versus the candidates that we receive. And so while we're mitigating risks on the lawsuit end, I want to see what can we do to mitigate bias from the filter process. And so that is where the question is coming from. But I don't know if there's an answer or not, so maybe that's something we can create. Board Member Watson.
To that point, Ms. Satterfield, I did ask Tammy if they offer anti-bias hiring training through their service. They don't, but I think that's something we could contract out through another service too.
Any other questions? Okay. Come back over here, Chair.
Okay, thank you, guys.
So, Mr. Watson, did you have?
Well, it's to the same discussion, but it wasn't for Tammy. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So at our retreat, one of the things that was brought up is that KEF said that they could possibly help support hiring a firm and potentially funding a firm. And we know recently they've helped us with our community engagement process around ESSER with NIET. And that obviously did not have to go through procurement. So I was wondering if Mr. Dupler could speak to what are some of the potential challenges of us going that route for this type of thing when we've done it in the past for other things?
Thank you, Mr. Watson. The biggest challenge would be that, as was mentioned last week, hiring a superintendent is one of the most important things that a Board of Education can do. Under state law, it is the Board of Education's duty and right to hire a superintendent, or director of schools as it's called in the code. So the board needs to avoid any type of conflict or certainly any kind of direct issue that shows that it's not intentionally, but in some way avoiding its duty and right to hire the superintendent. What do I mean by that? I mean that this board has adopted through the charter, this procurement process through the Knox County Procurement Office. So not using that could raise big questions there. But however, as was discussed last week, I mean, there are other ways to do it. The board could take it on of its own accord, or since the board is already, a member of TSBA, and that's been vetted through various, state regulations and through the Attorney General, then that would be another option.
Yeah. And if we opted to go through procurement, there's nothing at the end of that process that says, once we get through there, if we decide ultimately we actually do prefer TSBA service, we could still go that route even if we went through procurement, correct?
That is correct. I mean, as Mr. Myers was saying, I mean, once you get to the end of that process, you should have a qualified candidate if the board wants to go that route, but the board still has to give approval for that. And if the board decides, hey, we'd rather go, a different route at that point, TSBA or otherwise, then the board can decide that.
Thank you.
So, and just to personally speak about this for just a moment, I do think we need to have a lot of community input regardless of the avenue we take. And I know that KEF has generously offered to help facilitate that, and we have worked with them in the past, and, they work closely in our community and in our schools. So, if we do decide to use TSBA or whatever route we choose, I would really support using that organization to help gather community feedback as well. Ms. Horn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could we discuss, in addition to this decision, also we need to decide, I'm assuming that this board needs to go ahead and decide pretty soon, over the next month or so, to get together and talk through what we are looking for as a board. Is that everybody else's assumption? I don't think we talked about that a lot last week.
Maybe I'm confused, but it sounded, and obviously it depends on how we go forward, but it did sound like when she was talking about TSBA, that is part of their process, is talking to us and leading a discussion. Am I wrong about that? I mean,
okay,
now,
so if we went with TSBA, they would lead that. Okay.
That was my understanding from her. That's part of,
Gotcha.
They do the communities
I
one
think that would be great if somebody else, I mean, that's how we did it last time. We had a third party lead it anyway, so I think that's helpful.
Well, and one of the nuances that she said there in relationship to the board is that they would have individual conversations with board members as well.
That's what I heard, so I wasn't sure if I missed the whole board thing. Gotcha, thank you.
Ms. Babb?
Yeah, I think whatever we do, I really do like as much community involvement as possible. And I would even like to see it, when we talk about the process, maybe even on the other side of it, once we get candidates, having a way that we can get community involvement, maybe interviewing, community leaders interviewing. And I mean, a lot of times I do look at some of our higher learning places, whether it's, the technology center, the tech center, or Pellissippi or UT, some of those partners, because I do think that working relationship as well as business people, maybe some roundtables on the other end of it. And we always talk about it on the upfront side of what are we looking for? But then I think sometimes I would love to see some of that input too. Once again, not taking the decision out of our hands. I think it's ultimately our decision. But I think it would be interesting to see the questions even almost to listen in on a community roundtable of community leaders, kind of interviewing and vetting questions to our top candidates to see what they're looking for and what their impression is. And once again, I still at the very end of the day always think it needs to be our decision. And I did like I'm brain dead right now, I'm sorry. Miss Christie talking about the community input, whether it's just an addition to, once again, it depends on who we go with, but if we went to TSBA, they do the one day, but maybe add on some additional feedback just to get as much and as many different groups in. I just think that would really interest me.
Ms. Henderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to also just say I love the idea of bringing in KEF. They work in our community. They work in our schools. They're a great organization to get this organized for us. And I love the idea of the roundtables and bringing business leaders, because that was something that was important to me, to have that voice in there, just because the superintendent works with our higher learning institutions and works with these people daily, and they have a good insight. And so I love both of those ideas.
Oh, no, thank you. That's great. So I would say as my vote and my support would be to do a full-out RFP. And TSBA can still apply and that go through the process. I just feel like this just might be a little cookie cutter, and Knox County Schools is I think we are a very unique district, and just having a cookie cutter approach, that's what I got from the conversation. Now, I could be completely wrong, but having a cookie cutter approach might not get us to the direction that we need to go as a school system at this size and this capacity. So I would support an RFP that goes out, and if TSBA is the one that goes for it, then great. But yeah.
Ms. Horn?
Thank you. Now, Mr. Dupler, I don't think TSBA would not be a part of that RFP process. They wouldn't apply. Is that correct? Because they're already, how does that work?
I don't know. I mean, I'd have to get with Matt Myers on that, and he may be able to answer it right now. It looks like he's coming up, but I don't know that answer to that question right off, but maybe he does.
Madam Chair, thank you. They could apply. I mean, I look at them as a vendor as well. If they want to submit and everything else. It's not a closed process. You know, I'm all about being open and transparent and everything else, so they could apply, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is there an amount, like I know she was talking, they had a $6,500 and then 11, is there like an amount, a minimum amount for putting out an RFP? And I know, does TSBA fall under the professional services since we're already, I mean, I don't know how that would work.
Well, so TSBA, due to the amount, due to everything you just said, I mean, you know, you all could go through TSBA already. Matt Myers will tell you that up to $25,000, I mean, you don't necessarily have to have an RFP. You could have a different type of process. 25 to 50 is another a threshold. 50 and above, you have to have an RFP. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
So the amount does matter. That's the answer to that question.
Ms. Owen?
I think I have a question for Mr. Myers also. If TSBA does go through the RFP process and they are not the top candidate, and then we decide that we prefer TSBA, is that a possibility, or are they out of that contention?
Well, they would be out of the RFP process because, you know, like I said, we'd shortlist, rank, final evaluations, and get your top-ranked proposer. If they weren't that top-ranked proposer, then the RFP would just have to be canceled, and you all do a more of a professional services agreement with TSBA.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Babb?
You know, obviously, we're going to have to vote on this next week, but if we went the RFP process, then I think we should encourage TSBA to apply so that we see at the end of the day, how do they stack up? You know, and I mean, and I think, I don't know yet how I'm going to vote on it. I mean, I have to look at some of this more, but I think where Ms. Satterfield is coming from it is we do want to look at and make sure that we're, at the end of the day, getting the best services possible. And do we not know that with just knowing what TSBA does?
Ms. Bound?
Yes, Ms. Horn, since you serve on the board now of TSBA, I don't get the impression that TSBA will, I mean, and maybe that's a question to ask Tammy. I don't get the impression that TSBA is going to apply to be a part of Knox County's RFP, given the amount of superintendent searches they do. I mean, I know they're actively involved right now, and I just don't see, with their experience and what they've done, that is something that they really are going to step out and do. But I could be wrong, and that's a question, I guess, for Ms. Grissom. What are your thoughts on that?
Is that okay? You know, I don't know. I think that would definitely be a question that maybe we should ask her. I mean, I don't know if individually or we could ask Ms. Coatney to ask on our behalf, but I think that's a good question because I'm not sure if they would apply or not. And so two things. One, I am on the board of TSBA. I'm an at-large member this year on the board of TSBA. I received no compensation from TSBA, so, and I think that Mr. Dupler and their attorney have talked about if that's a conflict of interest or not, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Dupler, but I think it's been determined that it's not a conflict of interest. Can you speak to that?
I can. It's not a direct conflict of interest because you have no financial interest, as you just stated, and since you are noting a potential conflict publicly, then you might want to talk about if you can be objective or not.
Okay, thank you. So, if I may, so I feel like I've certainly learned a lot about TSBA over the last several years. I think the last time we went through this process, I was not in favor of TSBA doing the search. So I certainly feel more comfortable with them at this point. So I feel like I could be objective for that matter. Did I answer your question? Okay, thank you.
Were you done? Mr. McMillan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a comment in reference to what you were talking about, particularly in reference to what Ms. Bounds had said. I think TSBA would sort of look at it like, we're here, we do this. If you want us to help you, fine. But we're not going to go out and beg you for the job. If you want to go do somebody else, we'll enjoy seeing you at the state meeting.
I think he's probably right.
I do think, to follow up, sorry, I didn't wait for you to recognize me, Miss Christie, and I know how that feels. I would like for Ms. Coatney to maybe ask Ms. Grissom, because what I hear is a lot of people want RFPs, but they want TSBA to come in there and say, okay, here we are, we're one entity, and I just think we need, before we take a vote next week, to know if that's gonna happen or not gonna happen, and I kind of agree with my two colleagues here that I don't see that happening, so I don't think that, if you'll clarify, I don't even think that's a discussion going forward, so.
Mr. McMillan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question. Those of you that support the RFP, what is it about the process that you feel like you can't live without, in general?
Yeah, I think for me,
Are you okay? Okay.
Thank you. I think for me, it's just more of just comparing. I haven't went through this process with superintendent search, and I don't know what the process is. Again, it feels very cookie cutter, and now the other outside organization could do the same thing, and then that would clear my curiosity. But for me, I just want to see what else is out there outside of the Tennessee School Board Association.
Are you done, Mr. McMillan? Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. McMillan. I agree, too, that I don't think TSBA is going to want to jump in to an RFP. And that's why I asked Mr. Dupler the question, if we got through the RFP, even if they weren't a part of it, could we then still opt to go with them if we just felt like at the end of the day they were the better one, which we could do, correct? So regardless of whether or not they jump into the RFP, I don't think we're tying our hands by going through it. I agree with Ms. Satterfield. I think this is the most important decision that at least I'll be a part of in 4 years on the board. And so because of that, I really appreciate Tammy. She took a lot of time to answer my questions in advance. I appreciate the organization, but I'm comparing it to itself. I don't have anything to compare it to. And so I think having the opportunity as a board to be able to look at what others could do through a search is an important part of the process. And I also think that I might feel very differently if we only had 5 months or 4 months or something like that. But I think having 9 months, we have enough time to do that process in that way and go through an RFP. I know from reading TSBA's website, they said their average search is 3 to 5 months. So if you throw an RFP on top of that, I think we have ample time to go through that step. So I'm not feeling as pressured about the time maybe as some others. Thank you.
Ms. Horn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Matt, I have another question for you, if you don't mind. Oh, there you are. So my question is, in the RFP process, so when you're putting this out, are these firms that are do you specify that you want a firm that is that it's their business to search for superintendents?
That's what we did with the one that closed today. And, you know, obviously, when we're looking for medical directors in our present day, I think that's why we only got 2 responses. Not a lot of people want to touch that right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you have to at least let them know what you're looking for. You know, we're looking for a superintendent and give all the demographics of Knox County.
Okay.
You know, everything that we can give them enough information to respond the way we would like for them to respond.
Okay, so you would expect to get respondents back who feel like they are capable of doing that job?
Yes.
As far as specifically to the superintendent search?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. McMillan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one additional comment, and this should not be taken to indicate that I'm in favor or opposed to either side. But I was just sitting here thinking about Tammy Grissom. We all know who she is. We see her when we go to these things. And I don't think, probably because of longevity, I don't think there's anybody sitting around this table that's argued with her more than I have. I think she would confirm that. But having said that, I do think that she will look at it. It's Knox County. It's the 3rd largest system in the state. We, as her organization is, are determined we're going to do a good job and cover all the bases for them. For what it's worth, I just felt like I needed to make that comment.
Thank you. I have a question for Matt again. I'm sorry, you have to come back up to the podium. Can you tell me, and are you allowed to say this, how much did the RFP for the medical one that you have referred to, how much does that cost? How much did that cost you guys? The RFP process.
The RFP process getting to today, several staff hours. Miss Whitehead worked on it, a couple of days. We got a scope of work from Mr. Van de Veit. We actually got the job descriptions that were held in HR and made those as attachments.
Okay.
Put a dollar figure to it, it'd be hard to do, but a couple of days.
Okay,
one
couple days
person.
work. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Watts?
Thank you, Madam Chair. 2 more questions. I appreciate it. So you mentioned scope of work. So that's one of the things that the board, if we went through an RFP process, would help form and say, here's the things that we're looking for in a search firm. These are the aptitudes we would want you to have, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Well, yeah, that scope of work is for the firm that would come and do
Right.
the superintendent
work,
search.
right.
And that scope of work would be, different. It would be determined after we have the company under contract.
Right. Okay. And then if we went through procurement, it would not preclude Knox County Schools from having an alternative source of funding to pay for that service, would it? We would not have to pay out of our, let's say, general operating budget or whatever. There could be, if there was a third-party entity who said, we would fund that through a grant for you to pay for that, we could do that if we went through procurement or not?
I would be using general operating dollars or however they.
Well, no, I mean, when we actually pay for the search firm for their services,
Yes.
Are we able to use funds outside of our general operating funds to do that?
I would have to defer to Mr. McPherson.
Thanks,
Sorry.
Matt. I really need to vet that a little more. I don't see why we couldn't. Let me say it that way, and I may have to defer to Gary, but so Mr. Watson, to make sure I understand your question, you're saying that the funding for the search firm ultimately would come not from taxpayer
Yeah,
dollars.
I just want to make sure that by using the procurement process, it didn't tie our hands from using non-taxpayer funds to pay the search firm. If there was an entity that was willing to help us do that.
I don't see that it would, but I'll defer to Mr. Dupler.
Anybody can make a donation to Knox County Schools. Once that donation is made to Knox County Schools, unless it's restricted, Knox County Schools can use it for whatever purpose it intends.
Okay, because I think that is a question on the mind of the public is, no matter how much this may or may not cost, is that valuable? And I think it's important to know what the options are in terms of payment, so thank you.
I have two questions, but one of them is for you. So when we talk about developing the scope of work that would go out, would y'all help lead us in trying to figure that out, or is that kind of up to us to figure out? I mean, kind of walk me through that a little bit.
We'll be glad to try. But I really don't want to let him go, so I don't want, mine may not, no. I mean, we'll do what we can to help, obviously. I'll share with you, what we did for the, the one that just closed, if you give somebody, kind of a groundwork.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah, be glad to do that.
And then my next question's not for you. So, and this is where I had to scoot out of our workshop a little bit early, and I don't know if this is the place to talk about it, but did we talk about how we're doing the three-person committee, or if we're doing the three-person committee, did we even get there?
Well, we talked about it.
I had to leave.
There were various opinions, so I don't think we landed on anything specifically other than I think everyone was okay with having a three-person committee, but how that committee would be chosen, there were.
And maybe I'm wrong, but if we go the RFP process, it doesn't sound like the three-person committee would be needed till after their candidates. I mean, what do y'all think? I mean, well, that's what I'm wondering. If we're having a three-person committee, do we need them on the forefront of this process, or is it coming in, and maybe that's I'm sure this is, I guess, where we have to decide this too, or is it coming in once we kind of more have the vetting of candidates from the search firm? And once again, I hate that I have to leave a little bit early, so y'all might have already talked.
Well, and it might depend on what we land on too in the process, which process we land on. Ms. Horn?
Well, I was just thinking about because I kind of had the same question about the committee, like what would the role of the committee be? So we talked about it a little bit, and I think you had already left maybe, but we talked about that it would be kind of a liaison between the board, and it would probably, I'm thinking that it probably would be, into the process on timing and, basically just relaying to the search firm what the board's intentions, are, to make sure we're having the meetings, the public meetings that we want, to make sure we're, the community members are being invited, that kind of thing. So it would really be, it wouldn't be decision-making in nature. It would just be simply to make sure we are moving along the process.
Yeah, and now that I'm thinking about it, if you don't mind me saying it, I do think it would be good for this committee to be, once a search committee is working, they are the liaisons with them. So I do wonder, do we need it before the search firm is determined? It might be, if we go with the RFP process, maybe we need a three-person committee right away, or it might be by the time a search committee is selected.
Probably depends on if it's an RFP, it's not as big a deal. If it's TSBA, then we would need it sooner.
Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could the board's search committee be your RFP committee?
Not necessarily.
But could they be?
Good. If you want the same committee to who evaluates it to work with the search firm in you know, that statement of work that you know, what you're actually looking for. You know,
Thank you.
community input, so many candidates we'd like to see or interview, things like that. It can be the same or it can be different.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving forward, so I'm hearing that we want both, the option, I guess, to vote next week on whether we want TSBA or an RFP. Is that, am I hearing that correctly? And also, we need to decide how we're going to form this committee or the process. Because if we do go with TSBA, it sounds like we're going to need a committee pretty quickly, right? So, I would like to hear a little bit of board input on how they would want to proceed with that committee or how we're going to choose that committee.
Would it be helpful for us to contact Ms. Coatney and have her compile some thoughts on that?
That'll. Are you okay? Mr. McMillan?
Just a thought, since it's the board's committee, would we not, as Ms. Owens said, contact Ms. Coatney and then put a list of everybody that wants to be on there? If everybody wants to be on there, well, I don't know where we go from there. But in the past, we have voted. I mean, that's a customary procedure for you to start with a list and you vote around the table once. And the low person or persons, if there's a tie, you drop them and move on until you get down to your three.
I think, Mr. Dupler, could you speak to the sharing information with Ms. Coatney?
Well, I mean, if board members wanted to just indicate whether or not they wanted to serve, that would be one thing. I mean, board members can't communicate directly or indirectly, in this case, through Ms. Coatney and share thoughts and ideas and things like that. But if you're just taking a poll as to who wants to serve and who doesn't, then that would be allowable. The board can proceed one of two ways. The board can vote, just as Mr. McMillan proposes, or as board chair, Ms. Christie has the ability to appoint a three-member committee, and then the board would need to vote and ratify that committee.
Ms. Satterfield?
My recommendation is to the chair create the committee, and then we vote on it next week.
You're going to be on it either way, Ms. Satterfield.
And we're gonna make sure you're on there too, Mr. Mike.
Let's see how many people want to be on there first. Is that okay?
Sounds good. Yeah, just let Ms. Coatney know if you want to be on that. Okay, so moving on to does anybody else have any more thoughts on this topic? Nope, so we can move on to the regular agenda. Okay. So, consent agenda, under items and contracts, any concerns on or discussion on 1, 2, or 3? 4, 5, or 6? Item 7. Okay. And under board policies, concerns on A or B? C or D? E or F? G or H? I or J, K or L, or M or N. And just to make a statement on policy, we did have a policy review meeting last week, and the board did discuss these policies at length, so we're not just going through them really quick without having any discussion or review on them. And 8, grants, any discussion on A or B? Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. McPherson, can you share with the board if anything had changed in the budget for our ESSER grant from the time we heard the presentation to this application?
Thank you, Mr. Watson. I'm not, I may have to yield to Dr. Ryswick, but.
Anything of substance. I just want the public to know that, you know.
Not for ESSER 3, no. Not that I'm aware of. John, are you aware of anything? I think that this, again, this application, it's going to mirror, as far as I know, it mirrored what had been presented. Of course, it's in the accounting jargon and all of that, but I'm not aware of anything that changed since the budget, since the plans or recommendations were presented to the board.
Yeah, thank you.
I would just add, I think in talking to Ms. Martin, I know she's here, she may want to speak to it, but I think the main thing was is when we did the presentation, we wanted to present all the concepts. Where we thought there could be some changes would be, you know, if we said 150 tutors, maybe it was only going to be 140 once we did the numbers, or it could be 160. So I think in general, I think there may have been one swap maybe around something from ESSER 2 to ESSER 3 around technology. Does that sound right? I don't know, but maybe Ms. Martin could. I think that was the only, I think there was one place where we did, it was all still purchased.
Is it fair to say that the overall strategy and the objectives of this plan are the same from the presentation?
Right. Yes, that's correct. Good. Okay, Cheryl's here. Yeah. The one thing is kind of the swap, but it didn't change.
Yeah.
This.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Watson,
Yes.
The only thing that's changed from the original concept, and it really didn't change, is that we were able to add in some additional Chromebooks and technology.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Babb?
Yeah, and maybe this is Dr. Ryswick. What is the process now? So at this point, if we vote on this next week, is this just going to the state at this point, or what's the process in this actually ever finding out if we get this money or not?
Thank you, Ms. Babb. That's a great question. No, I'm kidding. No, we actually, the full grant has been submitted to the state. So some of these pieces are just pieces that we have to submit in. The first part of that is a planning grant. There's two items for ESSER on here. The first is the planning grant, the $150,000 that we were awarded. And I think maybe Mr. Watson had referenced earlier that KEF had helped us with that process. So this is reimbursement for them fronting money on some of that. And then the second part of that is just we talked in concept and the overall amount. This is just kind of the full budget, like the spending plan laid out. So this just goes to the state as part of that. They're still in that 30-day review. As of now, we haven't gotten feedback. I mean, I think the process has taken them probably a little longer than we thought. But we do expect with a grant that size that we'll probably have, some areas they're going to ask further questions on and that sort of thing. But to date, and talking to Ms. Martin yesterday, we don't have feedback on those questions yet.
And then once the state approves it and we work everything out to the state, does then the federal government have to approve it, or is it approved at the state level to be funded?
Once my understanding, again, Cheryl, come correct me if I'm wrong, is that the state already has their criteria for approval through the federal government. Once they approve it, then the dollars would be released to the districts.
Okay, so we're that's the last.
Correct.
So, under 8, item C or D? E or F? And under non-contracts, item A? Okay. And 10, regular agenda items, A or B? Item C.
Sorry. Thank you. Just so that the folks who are watching, item A, approve employee health insurance premium rates for 2022 to reflect employer covering entire increase. So I just wanted to kind of call attention to that because that will be good news to employees. So either of you want to speak on that, or just you think that kind of covers it? That basically there wouldn't be an increase to health insurance, correct?
Madam Chair, may I say one thing before Mr. McPherson? Have talked with Ms. Hancock, and we've got a collaborative conferencing session tomorrow afternoon, but Ms. Hancock has already talked with some members of the team, and the members of the conferencing team accept this, appreciate this recommendation too, and certainly would hope that the board would entertain approving it. It's a small increase, but as Ms. Horn said, it keeps the employee from having to pay any additional money for their share of the insurance. And right now, if you look at all of our policies, overall, we're at about a 71.1% average on all the different policies. This doesn't help us a whole lot, but it gets us to 72%. So anything we can do to improve the benefits, I think, is really a good thing to do. Our employees, and they've shown it this year, they've shown it last year, they show it every year. They work so hard. And anytime we can give them a benefit, whether it's salary or insurance or whatever, I just appreciate this board giving that consideration. On annual, if you look at annual cost, on some policies it's only $21 over the year, but on the highest policy it would be about $396 on the year. But again, every little bit helps. So just before Mr. McPherson speaks, just wanted to say a few words that and for our employees who work so hard and deserve everything we can provide for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Thomas. I think that pretty much says it all. Thank you for bringing this to us.
So 10C, D or E? Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can somebody just speak to item D in terms of the career and technical education class average limit and why that's being recommended?
Yes, Dr. Riswood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. So there is the layout for that. What's required? There's a reduced amount of seats for a CTE classroom. So the way if you don't ask for a waiver from the state, there's a limit to that. So you can have a maximum of 25 students in a CTE class, but the average for the day can't exceed 20, minus the waiver. So all this allows us to do is to have a max of 25 kids in a class, and it lets us raise the average for that to set to 25. So it just allows us to have more students in a class up to 25, and the average being 25.
And right now, we're having to seek this waiver annually, correct? We've done it for a number of years.
So, correct. And so there was a revision made in the law, 3 or 4 years ago, that if you have, and it was really around, I think, Metro Nashville, where they went to an academy structure. And that, so there's some language in there that if you have academy structures or academy-like structures, you don't have to have the waiver. So technically, like a freshman academy would count for that, or CTE kinds of academies within a school. So like Metro Nashville doesn't have to do that every time, but we do. I mean, any other district has to apply for that waiver to get to that, unless they have that kind of structure in a school or in a series of their schools.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, with no more questions, we will turn it over to the Vice Chair for public forum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before I go into my full duties as Vice Chair, I want to let the board know we have people signed up that are wanting to speak on items that are not on the agenda. So I want to see if anybody would be interested in entertaining a motion to suspend that part of our rules. All right, thank you. So before we go into public forum speakers shall address remarks to the entire board and not individual members. Each person speaking shall state his or her name and county of residence and have up to 5 minutes to make remarks unless time is extended by the majority vote of the board. Members of the board and the director of schools may have the privilege of asking questions to any person who addresses the board. The board respects and appreciates the good intentions that bring citizens to speak at public forum. The board asks that speakers show their respect to the board, the staff, and other citizens by speaking in a manner that is civil and courteous. The chair or vice chair shall have the authority to terminate the remarks of any individual who is disruptive, degrading, or insulting, or does not adhere to public forum rules. Our first speaker is Mr. Kevin Hill. All right. All right. Miss Helena Rego. Is Helena here? I'm here. Okay, great. No, you're fine. I didn't see you, no. State your name and county resident.
My name is Helena Rego, and I'm a Knox County resident of the 4th District. I do feel that it is very important that the community have an input on our new superintendent, whatever that may be. That's all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Next, we have Kaylin Jones.
Just to confirm, we can talk about off agenda items?
No.
Okay.
That's for our at the next board meeting, you will have the ability to do that.
Can I request a second amendment for that due to the discrimination of children with disabilities that is happening in our county right now?
So prior to starting public forum, I asked the board if they wanted to suspend the rules, and there was not a motion to do that.
Okay. So I then would like to touch on the policy that the board and the Knox County school system is receiving a grant for special education. That's what you guys are voting on next week. I don't think this board or anyone in this county deserves to get any extra money for special education when we're allowing children who are in special education to be discriminated against and not allowed to go in schools. And not only is that happening, but parents of children with disabilities like myself who aren't supposed to be in schools right now, I can't even speak. I'm being silenced in every way that I look. And you guys are about to get more money for my son, and I can't even come up here and talk to you about that. I'm not allowed to come up here and say that, but you guys are getting money from him. And he's not allowed in the school building due to a federal judge. So I just think that no one deserves that money for my child if I'm not allowed to speak for him. And if he's not allowed to go into a school because of his disability, no one deserves that money. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Parker. Bartholomew? Yeah, I didn't want to butcher it. You can say your name and county resident.
Parker Bartholomew, 816 Claybrook Court, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37923. I was going to talk about something that's not on the agenda. I will say that by the time the next meeting's up, if the order is followed, I'll be brought up, or could potentially be brought up on truancy charges. So I'm asking the board if I could talk now. If not, then I'll have to withdraw my children. You have 5 approved absences or unexcused absences before a social worker is involved.
Okay. Just for the sake of the decision that was made before public forum, we'll have to ask you to come next week.
All right.
Thank you. Next, we have Christina. Yeah, Christina G. Yeah.
It's Gehrman. It's totally not obvious. So my name's Christina Gehrman. I live in Knox County. I'm in District 1. I have a kindergartner and a 3.5-year-old. So I'm here to speak about the upcoming superintendent search, but I also wanted to thank the district for providing the student outcomes data that was presented earlier. I found that to be super helpful. And the presenter remarked that the economically disadvantaged students in Knox County are our most educationally fragile students. And that phrase really resonated with me. And I just wanted to ask the board to please prioritize those students and their educations in your plans to spend any federal relief funds that we are hopefully going to receive. And specifically, please, I want to ask you to invest in teacher retention at our Title I schools. And please invest in that aggressively and generously. I saw at teacher meet and greet this fall, my child is a kindergartner, and I saw the first graders coming back to hug their teacher who they hadn't been able to hug during that pandemic year. And I saw how much it meant and how much that relationship meant to them coming back into that school building. And I just know that that really makes a huge difference. But regarding the superintendent search, I know that everybody in town either is now or just was really mad at you all. And I guess I just wanted to say that I think it's really important that you conduct this search in a way that is going to earn the trust of the community, because right now we're all in a very vulnerable kind of ouchy position. And I think that it's the students, but it's also the teachers and their families who are going to be impacted by this decision. And so you really need to consider input from them if you want to kind of heal some of the divisions in the community in the process of choosing the next super. So to me, what that means, the way you do that, is it means transparency and it means community input at every single stage of the process, not just at the very end when you're vetting a list of kind of final candidates. We need to be able to weigh in on the process, not just the outcome. And I think actually that an RFP for an outside organization to run the search would allow the public to weigh in on the selection of that organization, and that would be very strategic of the board to kind of take that step to let the public weigh in on that process and have that part of things be transparent right from the very beginning. So when I was thinking about this, I was glad to see that Board Chair Christie went on the record in the Knoxville News Sentinel in support of transparency in the search process. And I was also glad to see Board Member Watson on the record in the Sentinel calling for anti-bias training for search committee members. But I wanted to note that one of the best ways, and in fact an essential way to actually conduct an inclusive and unbiased search is to constitute a diverse search committee up front. So the committee itself has to be representative. And the committee has to actively seek and seriously consider input from all of the parties whose interests stand to be affected. So for example, the representative who spoke earlier from TSBA said TSBA doesn't pick the candidates, they just screen them. And what that means is that the inclusive committee representation and any anti-bias training would have to happen at their level within that organization if it was going to be impactful for our search. So if we don't have that inclusivity and that training until it gets down to you all, and if they've already screened the candidates, the damage is already going to be done. So if you all are really committed to that, then you need to consider that as a kind of make or break feature of any search firm that you're going to hire. I guess the last thing I want to say on that is just that, I think that if the search firm that you hire, I understand the interest in using a third party, but you all are our board. That search firm is not here listening to me right now. You are here listening to me, and you are here making eye contact, and you are here kind of showing up for our students. And I just think we elected you because you have expertise. And so I would encourage you to just consider using that expertise to do a good faith search that engages the community and that allows for maximum community input. So final thought is just on the question of community input. Teachers and principals and all school staff really ought to have a dedicated active role and a voice in the search process and in the eventual hire throughout. They are the people who are inside the schools, they are the people who are most impacted, and they are the people whose expertise could really, really influence the kind of make or breakness of this person being able to do their job when they get in and they have to deal with our community with all of our friction and all of our diversity, and when they also have to deal with all of the specific challenges that students face in our school district, and all of the wonderful talents that our students have too. So, I just think if you could take all of these things into account, but especially, the fact that our next superintendent is going to work for us, for our community, for our children, and will serve the educational interests of our children. So the community, I think, deserves a central voice in the decision about their hiring. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Eric Moore.
Thank you for having me. My name is Eric Moore. I live in 37918 in District 2. I am a KPAS parent, and I'm here to represent my children, my family, and the interest of our community members. I understand that next week you're looking to discuss the $114 million federal grant known as ESSER that hopefully we will have the opportunity to spend. My understanding is that this ESSER grant has specific earmarked purposes to support our children who have lost learning due to the pandemic and to help further our mitigation efforts to prevent the continued spread of COVID-19 and to bring this to an end. I know that this has been a very difficult and trying couple of years for everybody in our community, no more than for our teachers, our administrators, our families, and our students who have all been so grossly affected by this tragedy and the difficult times that we have been facing. We all, above all else, want this to end. Despite there being so much division in our community right now, we are all unified in wishing that we were past this, unified in wanting what is best for our children, for our teachers, for our schools. It is critically important that we ensure that we receive the full $114 million that is already paid by our taxpayers for the purpose it is intended, for our schools, for our learners, to begin to make healing where there has been so much trauma. I recognize that the discussion about mask mandates has been polarizing. We see that in this room here. There is so much more that we can be doing above and beyond mask mandates that we have not been doing and that are not controversial. In the Knox, Tennessee Board of Education plan for safe return to schools, there are several things that they list that they want to see in our application for that ESSER funding, including, but not limited to, universal masking, physical distancing, hand washing and respiratory etiquette, improved ventilation, contact tracing, diagnostic screening and testing, encouraging our staff and students to receive vaccines, efforts to provide those supports and appropriate accommodations for children with disabilities. The reality is that these requirements have not been met, and this creates a very real danger that that $114 million that our schools are entitled to may not be distributed to Knox County schools. Last week, a federal judge ruled on this case, saying that we are not doing what we need to do. It is a federal judge of that magnitude.
Excuse me, sir, if you
that
can just
making
stay in the realm of
decisions
ESSER
about whether or
fundings.
not we will be able to receive these funds.
Yes, just stay in the realm of ESSER fundings and not discuss matters that are not on the agenda.
Ma'am.
Thank you.
Yeah. The choices that we have made to this point are undermining the likelihood of us receiving this ESSER funding. It's critical that we take the steps that we need to ensure that we are demonstrating that we can and will follow the obligations of this grant, that we can and will take steps that are not controversial, but that are effective in mitigating the effects of COVID-19, bringing healing to our community, and ensuring that we receive the funding that we need to support our parents, our teachers, our students, and our community as a whole. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Naomi Elliott.
Naomi Elliott, Knox County, Tennessee. So I try to look at the agenda items online since you don't have any paper copies out, but I couldn't find them, or there was an error with the link. But I know the topics are on nutrition and the homebound program, and I've been waiting to speak for months about those issues. We have to do better by our children. We have to stop using our taxpayer funds to purchase processed food to feed them. They're better than that. The choices that we make today are going to affect them for the rest of their lives. It's going to affect their children and their children's children. Anything that we consume into our bodies has effects. They have epigenetical effects. We are what we eat. Stop giving them all those carbohydrates. Give them more salads. In fact, I surely do hope there's no folic acid in those biscuits and all the buns and bread that they might eat, because that's toxic to a large majority of people. And people don't know it because they just listen to the recommendations from the CDC and the FDA, and they say it's safe, and the doctors listen to them and they say it's safe. And then they recommend it to pregnant women, and they say, here, take this and take extra, and we're going to give you a prenatal vitamin, and take it before you're even pregnant so your child doesn't get neural tube defects. And this concerns me about the teachers especially, because many teachers are of childbearing age and may consume that food as well. And they don't tell you that if you have certain gene variants and polymorphisms that, the doctors, they say, eat it or take it. And then they give you the free food and WIC, and they have all that folic acid in the bread and cereal and everything else. And it can cause miscarriages. And it can cause death if no one's there to help that woman when she's bleeding. What does she do? But they say it's safe. It's been in our food supply for 50 years. We have to stop. There has to be accountability at some point. We have to make sure they're getting proper amounts of protein. The definition of malnutrition is being protein deficient. And for example, my child was denied the first week of school of having nuts for snack. They said, well, she can bring peanut butter to the cafeteria because we separate the kids with peanut allergies, but we couldn't give her some almonds or walnuts or something already cracked open. It's not like a ball game where she's having to tear the shells open and there's going to be dust flying from peanut shells everywhere, because I know that's a concern, and I'm concerned about those children's safety just as much as their parents. I don't want harm to come to any child, but we have to have some kind of balance. There has to be a way to make reasonable accommodations without causing harm to children, without causing irreparable harm to children, because that's what's being done in our school systems. Do you understand what I'm saying? Let's see. We have to stop using processed salt because it has all the nutrients gone in it. It has aluminum in it as a byproduct. We have to be careful with the soy. And thank you for changing the PB&J that you couldn't find the ingredients on it. It said, go here and you click this link and click that link, and you can't find what the kids are being fed in the schools. And then come to find out it's a deception. They put PB&J and it's soy butter. Well, there's people with soy allergies too. And then soy's in everything, so everyone's getting too much of it, and it's a xenoestrogen. So then it causes all sorts of problems in the body with the hormones and everything else with the body. And the kids need to get more vitamin D. They need to be out in the sun more, the sun to synthesize the vitamin D, especially children with darker skin, because the more melanin you have, the more sun you need to synthesize proper amounts of vitamin D. You have to stop relying on the medical system for the homebound system, because students like myself were failed. Everyone else cheated off of me in school. I aced the test, even missing 3 days in a row, and the teacher says, you can't miss a day of this class or you're never going to catch up. And I didn't take my book home, and we get a pop quiz, and I make a better score than anyone else. But they said, we have to have a medical condition. I've had conditions that went for decades without being diagnosed. I've been misdiagnosed and harmed by the medical industry. And you want to put your faith and trust in your policies on a broken system? Don't do it. Don't do it with any of your policies. You have to trust the parents that they know what's best for their children, whether it's religion, medical, whatever it may be. They need to breathe. Breathing helps get everything where it needs to go. They have to, there's things that are vital to get these nutrients out.
Thank you so much. Madam Chair, that concludes public forum.
So before we move to board forum, can I ask Mr. Dufour to speak a little bit about just because we had a public forum speaker here concerned because her child could not go to school this week, about the mask exemptions that we currently have and where we are in the process of expanding that to to be more inclusive of our other students who also need to be in school without masks.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. As has been referenced, there is a federal court order from the Eastern District of Tennessee that has placed a mask mandate on the Knox County school system. I am limited in what I can say by the court because any attorneys who are involved in the litigation, because it's an active litigation, we can't make a bunch of public statements outside of what's done in the court. What I can talk about briefly is that what's already been filed. Okay, so the judge has filed an order, and the only two explicit mask exemptions in that order are autism and tracheotomies. This system has also interpreted that order as if some students have an IEP or a 504 plan that explicitly excludes masks, then we have looked at that as well. You asked about what's going on. Obviously, our office is taking measures as quickly as possible. There was a motion filed on Monday, that's public record, for relief. We filed another motion today for relief, again, public record, so those things can be referenced. But we're addressing it as soon as we can.
So moving to board forum, start with our student rep.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess I had two things to talk about. First was, of course, we returned to school yesterday with this new federal order. I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about, I guess, what happened on the ground there at the schools. I had the opportunity to talk with some students on our student advisory council yesterday afternoon, and I feel like what happened is kind of what we most expected. There weren't too many very large issues. Students, for the most part, complied with this order and are doing what they are being told to do by administrators and teachers. There are a lot of students who are not necessarily properly wearing their mask, but they do have that mask on their face. It is just not covering nose, but it is covering their mouth. I did hear about instances of students who fought with administrators who were trying to implement this mask mandate. There were some who were cussing them out and doing other not very great things for these administrators who are already very much overworked and very much tired. So of course I hope that does not continue as we go through this week and as we go on under this federal judge order. But yeah, overall it's things have gone fairly smoothly. There has been, of course, the protests we've had seen at some of these schools. Thankfully, I want to thank these people who have participated in these protests. They have been, for the most part, peaceful. There has not been any, harassment, largely violence, anything like that. So I'm very appreciative of that. There has been some harassment from both sides. I've heard anecdotally of students, protests going to students who have, who are wearing their mask and then take them off or calling them various names or whatever. But there have also been, on the other side, people verbally harassing these protesters, saying various things and, or otherwise verbally harassing them. But yeah, so overall, things are not going terribly in that front. Second thing, I'm not exactly sure who asked this, but who did I ask this to, but I know that within our ESSER 3.0 funding, we have money for tutors and throughout our school systems. I've been hearing recently from students, parents of students, about how their students are, because of last year, are very much behind on their education, and you're kind of wondering, what does this timeline look like for implementing tutors in our school systems to get kids back to where they need? I don't know who might have an answer for that, but Dr. Reiswick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Jin. So as we were saying earlier, so the process is, the funding is the ESSER funding for those. And our plan for the high school level is to have dollars for tutors, current teachers, to be able to teach either before school, after school, or on their plan period, depending on how that works out in the school. So the timeline really is, was within 30 days of submission. We were supposed to hear back from the state. We're really near those 30 days at this point. So we're expecting to hear that back pretty soon. But it sounds like what we're hearing is the state has kind of gotten backlogged maybe too on some of that stuff. So we're not exactly sure if after the 30 days they'll kind of give us this, here are all the questions for your plan, now you've got 30 days to respond, or if they'll slowly, kind of trickle things to us as they review the plan. So we're kind of waiting on that at this point. So I'm not sure, again, sometimes the way those big grants work is they'll release dollars and you continue to modify certain things with that, and sometimes they'll wait until those modifications happen. So we haven't gotten any feedback yet on specific things that we need to modify. So once that's done, our hope, I think our hope was that we would have that, soon, very soon. I mean, as soon as we can have that. So the process probably will be more like second semester for a lot of that tutoring. It's a little easier in the high schools because you're probably hiring current teachers, where the plan for the elementary and middle would be to hire full-time people who would come on board. We have a person who will be kind of heading up that tutoring process for us and monitoring that part for us as well. So I would say a safe bet is probably that would be more fully in swing in the second semester due to when the funding's available.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Owen? Mr. Watson? Ms. Babb? Ms. Horn?
I would just want to say thank you to our staff and teachers, and this is a heavy lift this week, and they've already been working really hard, and it's difficult. We know that. Thank you to the superintendent and his staff, and Mr. Dupler for all of your hours and hours that you've spent. This is a difficult situation for many, and so thank you for your patience as the law department is working through this. And so anyway, just wanted to acknowledge that it's difficult, and we hear you, and we actually absolutely see you. Thank you.
Ms. Henderson?
I think Ms. Horn covered all of everything that I'm feeling, but we do hear you and we see you, and just to the families and children that we're working hard for you guys.
Ms. Bounds? Mr. McMillan? Ms. Satterfield? Okay. And I would just like to add on top of what you did, I'm hearing a lot from our bus drivers and bus contractors, and they have a really heavy lift right now too. I know a lot of our contractors, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Superintendent, are down drivers, and we already started
That's
the
correct.
year down what, many?
30 or
Right,
so
on
drivers.
top of, so we have bus drivers doubling and tripling up on routes. So I spoke to one at 9 o'clock last night, telling me that it's becoming challenging for him to get kids to school on time. So I do just want to give a shout out to them, because a lot of them are doing double and triple routes now than what they're accustomed to, so. And I guess we are adjourned.